Subscribe to Sinister Shadows Studio, Insectum Infernum. The morning I woke up covered in minuscule red bites was the day I realized my apartment was infested. At first, I attributed the itching to mosquito bites from the previous night's walk. But by evening, my pale white walls seemed to be moving, covered with a sea of crawling insects. After a bit of research and a call to the exterminator, it was confirmed. My place was swarming with a rare breed of ants, their bite venomous and painful, especially in large numbers. The exterminator assured me they'd be gone by the end of the week. But they weren't just ants. I began to find beetles in my cereal, moths in my wardrobe, and, worst of all, a constant silent whisper whenever the lights went off. An ancient rhythmic chant, as though the insects were communicating, conspiring. Days turned to nights, and the insect population in my apartment seemed to grow. I felt trapped, moving from room to room, trying to avoid their ever-watching presence. Their bites multiplied, leaving my skin inflamed and scarred. And the whispering continued, growing louder with every passing day. By the end of the week, my once beloved apartment transformed into an Insectum Infernum, a hell of insects. The exterminator returned, his face pale as he saw the gravity of the infestation. He muttered something about this being unnatural and impossible. After several hours of futile effort, he admitted defeat. He had never seen anything like it before. Desperation led me to local libraries, searching for an answer. After hours of poring through old texts and environmental articles, I stumbled upon an ancient tribal tale. It spoke of a curse called the Whisper of the Insects. It was said that once every few centuries, someone would be chosen by the insect kingdom to bear the weight of their anger against human transgressions. As ludicrous as it sounded, I felt a chill down my spine. The symptoms lined up perfectly: the rapid infestation, the venomous bites, and that eerie, never-ceasing whisper. Desperate, I reached out to a known entomologist, Dr. Sarah Grint, who specialized in ancient insect behaviors. After hearing my tale, she agreed to visit my apartment. The instant she walked in, the whispering ceased. The insects formed a path, allowing her to move without disturbance. She nodded gravely, signaling that she understood what was happening. She explained, "These insects, they're not just ordinary pests. They're ancient, chosen ones. Their purpose is to remind humanity of its duty towards nature. Over the years, we've disregarded their importance, their balance. And now, they've come to collect." With trembling hands, I asked, "So, what can I do?" Sarah responded, "The old tales suggest a ritual, a plea to the insect kingdom. But it's risky. The plea requires an offering, a symbol of sacrifice." Understanding the gravity of the situation, I agreed. We set up a small altar in the center of my living room, surrounded by candles. In the middle, Sarah placed a small amber pendant with a prehistoric insect trapped inside. She began to chant, her voice echoing the same whispers I'd heard. The insects gathered around us, their tiny eyes fixated on the amber pendant. I felt the weight of 1,000 gazes as Sarah continued her chant. Suddenly, she grabbed my hand, placing it over the pendant. "You must show them you understand, that you respect their place in this world," she whispered urgently. With my heart racing, I closed my eyes and imagined a world where humanity and insects lived in harmony. I felt a deep respect for these tiny beings and their role in our ecosystem. As my thoughts deepened, a warmth spread through my body, originating from the pendant. The once frenzied movements of the insects slowed, and a profound silence filled the room. Moments later, Sarah stopped chanting, and I opened my eyes. The insects were gone, vanished as though they'd never been there. The only remnants of their presence were the scars on my body and the amber pendant, now glowing with a soft light. Sarah smiled. "You've appeased them, shown them the respect they sought. Remember this lesson and spread the message." Years have passed since that horrifying experience. I moved out of that apartment, but the pendant hangs around my neck as a reminder. I've since become an environmental advocate, teaching others the importance of respecting all forms of life. Because in the shadows, in the stillness of the night, I sometimes hear the faintest whisper, reminding me of the pact made and the debt humanity owes, the brood. When I inherited the old farmhouse from my reclusive Aunt Eleanor, I had no idea of the horrors that awaited me. Upon entering the house for the first time, I was greeted by the musky smell of age and the intricate lacework of cobwebs. After some tidying up, it began to feel like a cozy, rustic retreat. It was only at dusk, when the house's creaks became louder and shadows began their dance, that I heard the first soft buzz. It was coming from behind a sealed door, a door I hadn't noticed earlier. Prying it open, I found myself facing a small study room. Oddly enough, the room was pristine, contrasting with the rest of the dusty house. But the most striking feature was the massive hand-drawn map on the wall, pinpoints marking locations, and bizarre symbols I couldn't decipher. Dismissing it as one of my aunt's eccentricities, I retired for the night. That night, a dream, more like a nightmare, jolted me awake. I was in the study room, surrounded by swarms of insects. Each one whispered secrets in a tongue I couldn't understand, their small voices merging into a cacophonous chant. As they grew louder and closer, I felt them crawling on my skin, burrowing their way in. Waking up in a sweat, I found the morning sun a comforting sight. However, the room from my nightmare drew me in, an uncanny attraction I couldn't resist. The map seemed even more detailed than I remembered, and the pins, upon closer inspection, were not pins at all, but tiny, meticulously crafted insects, each unique. The soft buzz returned, but this time, louder and more insistent. Following it, I found an old journal hidden in a drawer. The entries were by Aunt Eleanor, each documenting her travels to exotic locations. Each trip was an expedition to find rare insects, and each insect had a corresponding entry in the journal. I began to understand her obsession. She believed these insects held ancient powers and secrets, each species a keeper of olden mysteries. As I read, the buzz grew stronger, resonating with the rhythm of my heartbeat. A stray thought crossed my mind. Was I now part of this ritual? Was this inheritance a mere accident? Days blurred into nights. Consumed by the journal and the map, I barely ate or slept. Aunt Eleanor's words began to transform in my mind, almost as if the insects she spoke of were communicating with me, making me a vessel for their message. One night, as the buzz reached an almost deafening pitch, I felt a sharp sting on my neck. Reacting instinctively, I slapped the spot and was horrified to find a crushed insect on my palm, its form identical to one of the pins on the map. The realization was gut-wrenching. The insects were not just part of the map or the journal. They were inside the house, watching, waiting, and they had chosen their moment. A frenzy of movement caught my eye. The map seemed alive as every single insect pin started to wriggle and break free, taking flight in a whirlwind of chaos. I wanted to run, to scream, but my legs wouldn't obey. I was rooted to the spot, watching in abject terror as the swarm surrounded me, each insect latching onto my skin. The pain was unbearable as they burrowed their way in, claiming me as their host. Hours or maybe even days passed. I woke up, disoriented and weak, the buzzing now a permanent background score in my mind. The room was empty, the map destroyed. Only the journal remained, now with an additional entry written in my hand. The brood has found its new keeper. The weight of my inheritance became clear. I was not just the inheritor of a house or a map. I was now the guardian of an ancient secret, bound by blood and duty to protect and propagate the brood. The outside world lost its appeal. Days turned into nights and nights into days. The buzzing became my companion, guiding me, speaking to me. I began my own expeditions, searching for more of these rare insects, documenting them and adding them to the brood. Time seemed inconsequential until one fateful day when a knock echoed through the house. Opening the door, I found a young couple, claiming to be distant relatives, curious about their family history. Inviting them in, I couldn't help but smile as the soft buzz began its familiar crescendo. The brood was ready for its next keeper, Within the Hive. From the outside, the town of Cilivale looked perfect. Picture postcard houses, blooming gardens, and laughter-filled streets. But I would soon discover its dark secret. The first sign was subtle. The day after I moved in, I found a dead bee on my windowsill. Then another in my bathroom, and a few more in the kitchen. By the end of the week, dead bees littered my home. That's when I met Ms. Radley, my elderly next-door neighbor. She came by to welcome me, her sweet smile barely masking the unease in her eyes. "You found the bees," she remarked. Not a question, but a statement. "Yes," I replied hesitantly. "Is there a hive nearby?" She glanced around and leaned in. "Not a hive, dear. The hive." I was about to question her further when a sharp knock interrupted us. Two men stood at my door, dressed in white, holding small metallic boxes that buzzed softly. "Routine inspection," one said, pushing past me. They scoured my house, collecting every dead bee. Ms. Radley watched them, her face ashen. Once they left, she grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "You need to understand, dear. In Cilivale, the bees are not what they seem." Over tea, she told me her story. Years ago, a meteorite had crashed nearby. The town had built a research facility over the impact site, but things had changed since then. The bees, previously harmless, began acting peculiarly. They swarmed homes, often in patterns, leaving behind only the dead. More disturbing were the nightly whispers. Faint and almost melodic, they seemed to emanate from the walls, a language not quite human. Some believed these whispers came from the bees, now controlled by an otherworldly force from the meteorite. "Tonight," Ms. Radley whispered, "listen closely, and whatever you do, don't respond." That night, as darkness blanketed Cilivale, the whispers began. They weren't just in the walls but in my head, like a hive mind trying to communicate. They grew more insistent, more demanding, urging me to answer. But I heeded Miss Radley's warning and remained silent. The next morning I found Ms. Radley's house sealed, the same men in white patrolling her yard. Panicking, I approached one. "She responded," he said simply. Determined to uncover the truth, I sneaked into the research facility that night. Inside, I found not a meteorite, but a colossal pulsating hive, emitting a fluorescent glow. Tubes ran from it to multiple chambers where people lay, including Ms. Radley, their bodies covered in a lattice of bee stings. The whispers grew louder, and an overpowering urge to join the connected overcame me. But a voice broke through, Ms. Radley's, urging me to fight back. Using all my strength, I tore the tubes from the hive, watching as the glowing liquid inside seeped out. The facility alarms blared, the men in white converging on me. With the hive's connection severed, the entrapped townsfolk began to awaken. Chaos ensued. I found Ms. Radley pulling her from the chamber. We, along with a few others, managed to escape just as the facility exploded in a ball of fire, taking the hive and its controllers with it. The aftermath was devastating. Cilivale was in ruins. Those from the facility were gone, and the town was finally free from the grip of the otherworldly bees. As we began rebuilding our lives, Ms. Radley turned to me, her eyes filled with tears. "We're free, thanks to you." But freedom came with a price. While the hive was destroyed, the whispers never truly left, a haunting reminder of Cilivale's dark secret. In the stillness of night, I often find myself gazing at the stars, wondering if somewhere out there, another hive waits, ready to claim its next unsuspecting town. Subscribe to Sinister Shadows Studio.